Welcome to the Science of Traveling Well. Let's travel someplace new together. Today, we're talking about the same trip we discussed last time, a December weekend getaway to beautiful, dynamic Rotterdam, the Netherlands, for my wife and I. In the previous episode, I described this unique city, where we went, and what the vacation meant for our relationship. Check it out here. Today, we're going to talk about another part of the trip, the photos I took. As you could see, I took several weird cameras with me. Why would I do that? Photographing is maybe the most obvious sign of a tourist. It's almost like a synonym. Photographing is sightseeing, is what tourists do. But is that good? Or is the camera a medium that gets in the way, that keeps us from really experiencing our experiences as visitors? Today, I have the privilege of discussing these questions with Dr. Jaime Kurtz, professor of psychology at James Madison University. Most of the research on the happiness outcomes of photographing as tourists come from either Jaime or myself, and I feel really lucky to be able to take apart the evidence and put it back together with you, Jaime, for some concrete advice. I'll start by summarizing what I found in a couple of studies I did. I did 3 empirical studies on photographing and tourist experience. The first 2 were cross-sectional street surveys of tourists in major Dutch attractions. This means that the conclusions only give a first indication. Basically, how are people who photograph more different from people who photograph less? In a paper I published with my Bachelor of Science in Tourism students, Sarah Gier and Paulina Schmitz, I found that people who photographed more were happier. Furthermore, in observing people's behavior, Gier and Schmitz also noticed that people seemed to enjoy photographing most when they treated it as a playful social activity. In a follow-up paper with students Esther Konijn and Nienke Sluimer, we also found that people who shared more photos were happier. The next step then was to see if we could use teaching photographing as a way of improving a tourist experience. Jolien de Graaf, a student working on her thesis, led 3 groups of backpackers on a guided tour of the Forte do Leme, a fort near Rio de Janeiro. One group she instructed in mindful looking, one in creative photography, and one in realistic drawing. The people instructed in drawing and photographing reported feeling happier after the tour than the group that merely looked. This was only a small pilot study with just 3 groups, each of which did just one of these experiences. But the results certainly look promising for photographing when you're a tourist. So I'd like to go from there and ask you, Jaime, if you can tell us about your research on photographing and what you found.
Yeah, so I did a study back at a college campus where I was working at the time, and I was curious to see, could mindful photography be distinguished from kind of garden variety mindless photography where you're not really looking or thinking too hard about what you're seeing? And then also, could we contrast it with a commonly used practice in the positive psychology literature, which was gratitude journaling, or writing about why you're grateful for what's in front of you? Because that's already a pretty well-established way of feeling more appreciative of what's in front of you. How does photography compare? So we got a sample of college students and randomly assigned them to one of these 3 experimental conditions and sent them out into the college campus with specific instructions. One group was instructed to take very mindful, thoughtful photographs, try to make them beautiful, meaningful, really zero in on something that matters to you. The second group, we asked to, instead of photographing the things, actually just write about it in a traditional gratitude journaling sense. And then the third group, we asked to we wanted them to take pretty mindless photographs. Just, don't rush, but imagine you don't have a lot of time to stop and frame your photograph. Just take it fairly quickly, which I think mimics how a lot of us take pictures when we're out and about in our daily lives. So we had measures of subjective well-being, mood, gratitude for college life, and we found that the mindful photography and the gratitude expression, the written expressions, operated fairly similarly to one another, whereas the mindless photography didn't really seem to benefit people.
Okay. And so I'm curious, would you describe this mindless photography condition as something that made a college student going through daily life take photos of that daily life like a tourist? Or do you think it actually didn't change their daily life at all? Like they took the pictures the way they would anyway in daily life?
Well, we instructed them to try to make the pictures very factual. Don't be
Oh,
artistic. Don't
okay,
be
yeah.
creative. We said something like, try to imagine you're creating a campus report, just like
I see,
very
okay.
factual. And then the other condition, the mindful photography condition, we really tried to emphasize, make these pictures really stand out, be beautiful, capture something meaningful to you. I'd like to think that when we're traveling, we do take pictures in that mindful way where we're trying to capture something. But from personal experience and just from talking to people, I think there's a wide range. Some people there's this compulsion to capture a moment because we won't be back.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit sad. So we want to preserve that moment on our phones or on our cameras. And we aren't often thinking about it. We're just sort of snapping a picture and moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one word that comes to mind in that description is obligation. And when Gier and Schmitz, they were doing their observation, they said that photography kind of went in two directions, which partly overlap with your two experimental conditions. They said that one felt kind of like an obligation, and that really overlaps with what I guess you would call your control condition, right? Where, they were instructed to take photos quickly for a campus report, as it were. But the other mode, rather than being creative, which is something that happens in a person's mind that they then couldn't really see, was social, right? So when they saw multiple people playing together through the process of making a photo, they seemed to really enjoy it, which is also maybe not that surprising. So the key then is maybe not so much to take pictures or not take pictures, but how you do it.
I think that's true. And it sounds like your condition had a social element to it. And when we're traveling, sometimes actually it pulls you away from people to take a picture. You either want them to move out of the frame, or you just have this moment of isolation from other people. So there are so many different ways to do it. And how you take pictures while you're traveling, I think actually really matters.
Yeah. So how should we?
So, to mimic the elements of my mindful photography condition, just really use the camera as like a tool. Like, what in this environment do I want to capture? What is the most beautiful, meaningful thing here to me? What's wowing me? Sometimes I ask myself, if I can just take one picture of this scene, what would it be? Because with our phones, we have infinite capacity to take as many pictures as we want, and we can do that to a fault. And then we look back and we're like, why did I do this? I wasn't present in the moment. So limiting the number of photos we take, really being thoughtful about what we capture, and doing it in a way that doesn't pull us out of the experience of just being there, but using it as a tool to enhance the experience of being there.
Yeah, I think the creativity condition that you created, it works in exactly that way. It puts the person in the place by inviting them to pay more attention to the place.
It reminds me of your drawing condition a bit. You can't detach from drawing something. You have to look at it. You have to be present. And photography can do that for us if we let it. But it's very easy to just mindlessly snap photos.
Yeah. So I think the key in the end is to engage with the place you are and use methods such as photographing or drawing to enhance your attention to it.
Yeah, and there's a study, not by me, but by a cognitive psychologist, that found that people's recall of a place is better when they use their cameras really thoughtfully and use it to zero in on a detail that mattered to them, as opposed to just kind of stepping back and taking a picture of the scene and moving on. It's almost like people outsource their memory to their phone and don't make memories for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think in the kind of modern attention environment, to apply your own attention with that much detail is really very difficult. And if a device helps you do that without kind of interfering or diminishing something else, then I think it's a very good thing. But how you do it seems to be the key.
Definitely. And maybe think twice about immediately going on Instagram or whatever social media platform you prefer and posting it right there in the moment, because that's really going to pull you out.
Yeah, that puts you in that online world immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe say a few things about how you personally, when you travel, how you photograph, how you make those choices, with what kind of equipment maybe?
Is this where I say I don't always practice what I preach? Or
Feel free.
I think I do take too many photographs sometimes. I enjoy it to a point.
Yeah.
And you never know like what you're going to capture just kind of serendipitously. But I can be, especially if I'm traveling alone, because I want to share what I'm experiencing with other
Right.
people and they're not with me. So sometimes I can overdo it and I do have to really rein it in and really think about, what about this do I really want to share with people? And then when do I share it? I'm not going to share it right then and there. I'm going to wait until later when I have some downtime, and I can use that downtime to like look back at my pictures and think about what a nice day it's been, what a great experience it was while I'm sharing them.
And you sort of create an enjoyable moment out of that moment, maybe in the evening that would have otherwise been a bit ordinary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, as y'all saw in the beginning of the episode, I brought film cameras on this trip, and there's two things I particularly like about them, maybe three, given this discussion. First of all, as you saw on the 110 SLR that I had, I only had 3 frames left, right? So for a trip of 2 days, I had 3 photos to think very carefully about how to use. And that is limiting, maybe a little bit stressful on the one hand, but it definitely turns the creativity all the way up. Another thing I like is if you have some control over the settings, that enhances how you kind of apply creativity to what you're looking at. And then the third thing, and that's really totally unique to film cameras, is that you don't see the picture afterwards. And you create this totally other moment when you get that envelope in the mail and you unpack it and experience your photos again. So if you have the budget and if you have some doubts about how you take photos on vacation, but you can't accept not photographing, or you buy the evidence that basically you'll enjoy it more while photographing, trying film photography is a possible alternate approach. And then the other camera I had was an instant camera, and that's something like in between the two, right? Because you get even more technical challenges, but you get to see the thing a little bit sooner, but not right away. So plenty to play with, but play, creativity, and attention to the moment are key, not unlike in other parts of life.
Absolutely. Just the stakes are higher often when we travel.
Yeah, because like you said, you don't know if you'll be there again.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to visit Rotterdam, or you want to be there again, there is, of course, a direct train from Breda or from many other locations in the Netherlands. And for a little bit more practical information and where I went, please see the previous episode. And with that, I'll thank you so much for your attention and happy travels. The Science of Traveling Well was initiated partly thanks to an HBO postdoc grant of the Regieorgaan Stichting Innovatie Alliantie of the Dutch government.